Stop. Don't just listen to this video. Do something right now. Sit up a little straighter, take a slow breath, and pay attention, because if your blood isn't flowing properly, nothing else you try will work the way you want it to. I've spent over 15 years as a urology specialist working with men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s. And I'll be honest with you, most of them come in saying the same thing. Doc, I feel weaker. I get up at night more. Things just aren't working like they used to. And for years, I treated it the same way most doctors do: medications, supplements, quick fixes. Some helped for a while, but something always felt off. What surprised me, what really stopped me in my tracks, was when I started seeing the same pattern over and over again. Men with decent hormone levels, men doing everything right, still struggling. Low energy, poor circulation, weak urinary flow, declining performance. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a hormone problem. It was a blood flow problem. And here's the part most people get wrong. They think more stimulation or stronger medication is the answer. It's not. If the arteries are clogged, you're just forcing blood through a blocked system. That realization changed how I look at everything. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the one meal I now recommend to my patients, the one that targets blood flow at the root. And more importantly, I'll break down the 6 key factors behind it, the ones most urologists never even mention. And the 5th factor is the one I almost dismissed at first. Honestly, I didn't think it mattered that much, but in the end, it turned out to make the biggest difference in how this entire system works. If you're curious where this comes from, I've left a deeper explanation down in the description below. But before we go further, quick question. How old are you? I read every comment and I really want to know who this is reaching. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with the number 1 meal that helps open up your arteries and bring your energy back. 1. Arugula. Activate nitric oxide. Let's start with something so simple that most men overlook it. I want you to add one thing to your day starting tomorrow. 2 to 3 cups of fresh arugula, raw, not cooked. You can toss it in a bowl, drizzle a little olive oil later, or just eat it as a side with lunch. Nothing complicated, nothing expensive. It sounds almost too easy, but what's happening inside your body is anything but simple. Here's why this matters, especially if you're over 60. As we age, our bodies produce less nitric oxide, the molecule responsible for relaxing your blood vessels and allowing blood to flow where it needs to go. When nitric oxide drops, your arteries become tighter, circulation slows down, and that's when you start noticing things like lower energy, weaker performance, and even changes in urinary flow. Arugula is packed with natural nitrates, and your body converts those into nitric oxide through a process that begins right in your mouth and continues in your bloodstream. Now, this is the part that surprises most people. When you chew arugula, bacteria on your tongue help convert those nitrates into nitrites, which then become nitric oxide once they enter your system. Within a couple of hours, your blood vessels begin to relax, your circulation improves, and your body starts delivering oxygen and nutrients more efficiently. There have been clinical trials showing that nitrate-rich vegetables can improve blood flow and reduce blood pressure by around 5 to 10%. And in some cases, men reported noticeable improvements in vascular function in just a few weeks. But here's the dual benefit that really matters. This isn't just about circulation to your heart or your brain, it's also about the small arteries in the pelvic region, the ones that support bladder control, prostate health, and sexual function. Those vessels are smaller and more sensitive, which means they're often the first to be affected when blood flow declines, but also the first to respond when you restore it. So what you're doing with something as simple as arugula is supporting both your overall cardiovascular health and the areas that directly affect your daily confidence and quality of life. Now let me show you exactly how to use it. You want 2 to 3 cups per day, ideally eaten raw, because heat can reduce some of the nitrate content. The best time is with lunch, so your nitric oxide levels peak later in the afternoon and evening when your body benefits most from improved circulation. And consistency matters here. This isn't a one-time fix, it's a cumulative effect. The more consistently you give your body these compounds, the more your vascular system adapts and improves over time. And one more thing, there's a small habit that many men have, something they do every single morning that can completely shut down this entire nitric oxide pathway without them even realizing it. And once you hear it, you're going to see why this step alone can make or break everything we're talking about. 2. Olive oil. Clear cholesterol from your arteries. Now let's go one level deeper because opening your arteries is only half the equation. If the inner walls are still coated with cholesterol and inflamed tissue, blood flow will always be limited no matter how much nitric oxide you produce. This is where extra virgin olive oil comes in, and not just as a healthy fat, but as a targeted tool that works on a very specific biological pathway that most people never hear about. In traditional Mediterranean medicine, olive oil has been used for centuries as a daily cleansing food, something that protects the heart and keeps the body resilient with age. Modern science has finally caught up to explain why. High-quality extra virgin olive oil contains a compound called oleocanthal, which acts almost like a natural anti-inflammatory agent inside your blood vessels, calming the irritation that leads to plaque buildup and progression. But here's the central mechanism that matters most. Olive oil activates a protein called ABCA1, which is responsible for pulling cholesterol out of your artery walls and transporting it back to the liver, where it can be processed and removed. This process is known as reverse cholesterol transport, and it's one of the only ways your body can actually reduce plaque from the inside. In other words, you're not just slowing the problem down, you're helping your body clean itself. There was a large Mediterranean dietary study showing that people who consumed high amounts of extra virgin olive oil had about a 30% lower risk of major cardiovascular events. Another clinical trial found improvements in HDL function and cholesterol removal efficiency by up to 10 to 15% when high polyphenol olive oil was used consistently. What's even more interesting is how this works together with what we just talked about. Arugula opens the arteries and olive oil helps clear them, creating a synergistic effect where blood flow doesn't just increase, it actually has a cleaner pathway to move through. Now let's talk about risk, because this is where many men unknowingly sabotage themselves. Low-quality processed oils, often labeled as light or overly refined olive oil, don't contain enough of these active compounds. Even worse, diets high in seed oils and processed fats can increase inflammation, essentially canceling out the benefits you're trying to create. So the quality of what you're using matters just as much as the quantity. Here's exactly how to start. If you're new to this, begin with 1 tablespoon per day for the first few days to let your digestive system adjust. Then gradually increase to 3 to 4 tablespoons daily, ideally drizzled over your arugula or taken with meals, not cooked at high heat. Look for oil in dark glass bottles, check for a recent harvest date, and pay attention to taste. A slight peppery burn in the throat is actually a sign of those active polyphenols doing their job. And over time, this builds. Week by week, your vessels become less inflamed, more flexible, and more efficient at clearing out what doesn't belong there. But even with cleaner arteries and better blood flow, there's still another process happening quietly in the background that can undo all of this progress if left unchecked, and most people have no idea it's even happening. 3. Pomegranate. Stop plaque before it starts. Now we move into something more aggressive because it's not enough to open your arteries and clean them, you also have to stop new damage from happening. This is where pomegranate becomes incredibly powerful, and the key compound you need to understand is called punicalagins. These are potent antioxidants that directly interact with your cholesterol particles, especially LDL, which is the type most responsible for plaque formation. Here's the process in simple terms. When LDL cholesterol becomes oxidized, your body treats it like a threat, triggering inflammation and causing it to stick to your artery walls, forming plaque over time. Punicalagins bind to these LDL particles and protect them from oxidation, essentially stopping that chain reaction before it even begins. What's remarkable is that this process can start quickly, within hours of consumption, because these compounds enter your bloodstream and begin circulating almost immediately. There have been clinical studies showing that regular pomegranate consumption can reduce oxidative stress markers by up to 30% in just a few weeks, and in some cases improve blood flow to the heart by over 20% within 3 months. Another study observed improvements in arterial thickness and plaque progression, suggesting not only prevention but potential reversal over time. But what many men notice first isn't a lab result, it's how they feel. Better endurance, more stable energy throughout the day, and less of that heavy, sluggish sensation that often comes with poor circulation. Now I know what you might be thinking. Some people say pomegranate is inconvenient, messy, or too tart to eat regularly. Others worry about sugar content or digestive discomfort. But here's how I look at it. If you feel a slight tartness or even mild stomach sensitivity at first, that's often your body responding to a concentrated source of antioxidants, not a harmful effect. In fact, that reaction usually settles as your system adapts, and it's often a sign that these compounds are actively engaging with your metabolism. So here's exactly how to use it. Aim for about 1 cup of fresh pomegranate arils per day, ideally added to your arugula and olive oil combination at lunch. If fresh fruit isn't available, you can use 100% pure pomegranate juice, about 4 to 6 ounces, but avoid anything with added sugar. Timing matters here as well, because when you combine this with nitric oxide production and improved lipid transport, you create both a short-term boost in circulation and a long-term reduction in arterial damage. And that's the key. You're getting immediate effects within hours, while also building protection over weeks and months. But even if you do all of this right, open the arteries, clean them, protect them, there's still one silent factor that can slowly harden your blood vessels from the inside, and most men never realize it's happening until it's too late. 4. Vitamin K2. Stop arteries from hardening. Now, this next step might sound a little unusual at first, especially if you've always been told to focus on calcium for bone health. What I'm about to show you is almost the opposite of what most people expect, because it's not about getting more calcium into your body, it's about controlling where that calcium goes. And if you get this wrong, you can actually be strengthening your bones while slowly hardening your arteries at the same time. The key compound here is vitamin K2, specifically in the MK7 form, and its role is far more precise than most people realize. Vitamin K2 activates a protein called matrix GLA protein, which acts like a gatekeeper for calcium, directing it into your bones and teeth while preventing it from depositing in your blood vessel walls. Without enough K2, calcium can accumulate in your arteries, leading to calcification, which makes those vessels stiff, narrow, and far less responsive to the signals that regulate blood flow. Here's where it gets deeper. Once arteries begin to calcify, they lose their ability to expand and contract, which affects both large blood flow and microcirculation. That's when men start noticing real-world symptoms: cold hands and feet, slower healing, numbness, weaker urinary flow, and reduced responsiveness where it matters most. Studies have shown that higher intake of vitamin K2 is associated with up to a 50% reduction in arterial calcification progression, and another long-term study found about a 30% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality in individuals with higher K2 consumption. What makes this even more important is how it connects with everything we've already talked about. You can open your arteries with nitric oxide, you can clean them with olive oil, and you can protect them with antioxidants from pomegranate, but if calcium continues to build up, you're still dealing with a rigid system that can't respond properly. Vitamin K2 brings flexibility back into the equation, allowing both major arteries and tiny microvessels to function the way they're supposed to. Now here's how to use it correctly. If you're new to K2, start with around 50 micrograms per day and gradually increase to 100 to 200 micrograms daily, ideally taken with a meal that contains fat, like your olive oil salad, because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. You can also get it naturally from aged cheeses like Gouda or fermented foods, but consistency is key here. Avoid taking it on an empty stomach, and if you're on blood-thinning medication, this is something you should discuss with your doctor first, because K2 can interact with those pathways. Over time, this becomes a structural change. Your vessels don't just flow better, they become more elastic, more responsive, and more efficient at delivering blood where it's needed. But even if you combine all four of these, opening, cleaning, protecting, and restoring flexibility, there's still one factor that can either amplify everything you've done or quietly reduce the results without you even noticing it. 5/timing. Activate the circulation window. Now, this next step might sound a little unusual because it's not about adding anything new to your plate, it's about controlling when everything you're already doing actually works inside your body. Most men focus on what to eat, but almost no one pays attention to timing, and that's a mistake because your body doesn't respond the same way at every hour of the day. If you get the timing right, you can amplify everything we've talked about so far without changing a single ingredient. The key compound here is nitric oxide again, but now we're looking at how it behaves over time. After you consume nitrate-rich foods like arugula, your body begins converting those compounds step by step, first through oral bacteria, then into nitrites, and finally into nitric oxide circulating in your bloodstream. This process doesn't happen instantly. It builds and peaks roughly 2 to 3 hours after eating, which means your blood vessels are most relaxed and responsive during that window. This is where it gets interesting. Studies on dietary nitrates have shown improvements in vascular function and blood pressure reductions of around 5 to 10% within hours of intake, and in some performance-focused trials, participants saw up to a 15% increase in blood flow efficiency during peak nitric oxide activity. Another line of research suggests that aligning nitric oxide peaks with periods of activity improves both macro blood flow, like circulation to major organs, and microcirculation, which affects the smallest vessels responsible for tissue oxygenation. Now think about how that applies to real life. Many men over 60 notice symptoms like cold extremities, numbness, slower healing, or reduced responsiveness later in the day, especially in the evening. That's not random. It's often when circulation is struggling the most, and if your nitric oxide levels are low during that time, your body simply doesn't have the support it needs. But if you time your meals correctly, you can shift that entire pattern. Here's exactly how to apply this. Start by eating your main vascular support meal at lunch, not dinner, so your nitric oxide levels peak in the late afternoon and evening. If you're new to this approach, just begin with one properly timed meal per day, then stay consistent for at least 1 to 2 weeks before adjusting anything else. Avoid eating it too late at night because your metabolic activity slows down and you won't get the same conversion efficiency. There are also small factors that enhance absorption and effectiveness. Staying hydrated helps transport these compounds through your bloodstream, and moderate movement, like a 20 to 30-minute walk after your meal, can further stimulate circulation during that peak window. But be cautious if you have low blood pressure or are on vasodilating medications, because stacking these effects can sometimes make you feel lightheaded at first. Over time, this becomes a rhythm your body adapts to. You're not just eating for nutrition anymore, you're aligning your biology with your daily needs, improving both large-scale blood flow and the microcirculation that supports healing and function. But even with perfect timing, there's still one final factor, something small and easy to ignore that can either unlock everything we've built or quietly shut the entire system down. 6. Oral bacteria, the hidden switch for nitric oxide. Now, this last step might sound strange, maybe even a little uncomfortable to hear because it goes against what most of us have been taught about hygiene. I'm not telling you to stop brushing your teeth, but I am telling you that the way you clean your mouth could be quietly shutting down one of the most important blood flow systems in your body. And if that system is blocked, everything we've talked about, arugula, olive oil, pomegranate, even timing, loses a big part of its effect. The key player here is not a food, not a supplement, but a group of beneficial oral bacteria that live on your tongue. These bacteria are responsible for converting dietary nitrates into nitrites, which are then turned into nitric oxide in your body. Without this step, the entire nitric oxide pathway is interrupted, and your body simply can't produce the levels needed to properly relax your blood vessels. Here's how the process works. You eat nitrate-rich foods like arugula. Those compounds mix with bacteria in your mouth, and enzymes produced by these microbes reduce nitrates into nitrites. Once swallowed, those nitrites enter your bloodstream and are further converted into nitric oxide, especially in low-oxygen environments where your body needs it most. This means these bacteria are not just passive residents, they are active participants in regulating both large blood flow and microcirculation. Now here's the problem. Antiseptic mouthwashes, especially the strong ones used daily, don't just kill harmful bacteria, they also wipe out the beneficial ones that drive this entire process. Studies have shown that using antibacterial mouthwash can reduce nitric oxide production by up to 25% and in some cases increase blood pressure by 2 to 3.5 millimeters of mercury within just a week. Another study found measurable declines in vascular function when this oral pathway was disrupted, showing how critical this step really is. And this shows up in real life more than you think. Men often report colder hands and feet, slower wound healing, reduced endurance, and weaker responsiveness, especially later in the day. These are signs that both macrocirculation and microcirculation are not functioning efficiently, and sometimes the issue isn't what you're eating, it's what's being blocked before your body can even use it. So here's how to approach this safely and effectively. Continue brushing your teeth twice a day, but avoid using strong antiseptic mouthwash immediately before or after meals rich in nitrates. If you're used to daily mouthwash, start by reducing frequency to once per day or switching to a milder, non-antibacterial option. Give your oral microbiome time to rebalance, usually over 1 to 2 weeks, and you may begin to notice subtle improvements in circulation and energy. There are also small ways to optimize this. Avoid extremely hot liquids right after consuming nitrate-rich foods, as excessive heat can disrupt the oral environment temporarily. Stay hydrated, chew your food thoroughly, and allow that natural conversion process to happen. And if you have gum disease or oral infections, you should absolutely work with a dental professional because untreated issues can also interfere with this system in a different way. Over time, this becomes the missing link. You're not just feeding your body anymore, you're activating the full pathway that turns nutrition into function, from large arteries down to the smallest capillaries. And now that you understand all 6 pieces, opening, cleaning, protecting, softening, timing, and activating, you're ready to see how they all come together into one simple daily meal that brings everything back into alignment. If this made sense to you, don't just watch and move on. Take a second and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. In the upcoming videos, I'll keep breaking down simple science-backed strategies like this: how to improve blood flow, protect your arteries, and keep your energy and performance strong after 60. Everything we talk about here is practical, realistic, and built on real physiology, not hype. And if this helped you even a little, share it with someone who might need it. I appreciate you being here truly.